My name is Helen, and I'm 32 years. Although it is the beginning of a new year, nothing good has happened at all. Most of our electrical appliances in our house have broken down, and my eldest daughter, Maggie, had to change classes as soon as she entered the third grade. And since she wasn't in class with her best friends, she went to school feeling very grumpy. She often asked for a day off because she was unhappy at school. I try to calm her down and make her school every day. But to be honest, difficult to do that every single. My younger son, Tim, started playing volleyball in the spring at his club team. Recently, he sprained his finger while playing. It seems like he had a fracture and arrive at work late every week to the hospital. People at work makes me feel ashamed of myself every day since. They would talk behind my back just because I had kids. My husband, Dan, quit his job 3 months ago because he was mentally depressed due to the horrible power harassment he received from his previous boss. Although he transferred to a new company where it's easier for him to work, his income has dropped dramatically. Despite these problems that have happened to our family, Dan and I are doing the best we can at the moment. Recently, however, something horrible happened to our family. My mother passed away. She had been very healthy until recently, but she had been feeling exhausted for some time and went to the nearest hospital for a checkup. I accompanied her to the hospital where the doctor told us what was wrong with her, and I really couldn't believe my ears. She had terminal cancer. My mother was surprised as well when the doctor told me that the disc progressed to the point where there's nothing they could do. My mind went. My mother, who was surprisingly calm and encouraging, helped me through it all.
Oh, don't worry. I'm sure you'll improve with practice.
My mother's positivity during times like this was one of the best things about her. It even seemed like she was pretending to be fine. Her condition worsened day by day, unfortunately, and only 1 month after being informed by the doctor about her diagnosis, she passed away. The pain and loneliness of knowing someone's life had been snuffed out and that I could no longer talk to Mother, who I loved so much, overwhelmed me, and it felt like there was a huge hole in my heart because I had my kids and because I was so busy with preparations for the funeral. I couldn't even feel the sadness of my mother's death. After everything was over, a sense of profound sadness overtook me, and I sobbed in my mother's photo, realizing that I was actually saying goodbye to my beloved friend. Then right after, something happened. One day, a month after my mother's, found a letter from a credit card, our mailbox, and it was sent to my name. I did indeed have a credit card, but never used it since I got married. It was hidden in the back of the drawer. I kept my bank book and personal things, thinking for a moment that it had a new credit card had arrived. Then, when I opened the letter, I found a detailed statement of the credit card account, which stated that I had used the credit card and had absolutely no recollection of doing so. The total amount exceeded $10,000. Even though I looked at the detailed statement over and over, I still didn't know what they all were. I thought my credit card information had been hacked, so in a panic, I called my credit card company. I explained the situation and asked to stop the card. Then, when Dan came home from work, I apologized to him and explained the situation.
My credit card information might have stolen. About $10,000 were used with card.
Huh? You're joking, right?
Dan couldn't believe what he was hearing. I apologized to him repeatedly. Immediately after that, I searched through all the drawers in my room to find the credit card I had put away, but I couldn't find it anywhere. I even came up with the theory that thief had stolen it, since I never saw the credit card again after I put it in my wallet the last time.
This all happened because you had a card that you never even used.
I couldn't say anything back to Dan, half angry and half up with the situation, as he had a point and all I could do was keep apologizing. Since it was impossible to pay it a lump sum, we finally decided that was sick, pay it back in installments, and for of the day, I was just depressed. That day, after the kids had gone to bed, I was reviewing the family's credit card statement. Besides Dan, who was looking over my shoulder, no one else knew about our financial problems. Dan looked like he realized something.
What happened?
When I asked, Dan pointed to one pair item on the statement that made me by looking at it.
It was the name of a hotel that she was going on a trip with this month, and that's where they sick staying at, and $4,000 are being charged there.
I didn't even know my mother-in-law was traveling until Dan told me just now. But when I stopped at the credit card company, I remembered that the lady on the other end of the phone had told me that it would be available at a certain outlet mall as well. That outlet mall was also located at where Violet had traveled to. And on top of that, Violet had visited just last month. So I got more suspicious and came up theory.
Could it be that Violet has my cred?
Dan thought the same thing, so he called Violet. At first, Dan was afraid to ask over the phone, but he gradually became increasingly irritated once he began talking to Misuse.
What the hell were you thinking? This is a crime, you know.
As we expected, Violet took my credit card from the drawer while we weren't looking. She used the card to pay for her friend's hotel fee and spending sprees at the mall. And it seemed like she didn't think did was anything wrong. Dan thought that anything he would the phone would not get us anywhere, decided to visit Violet later on too for more details. Of course, I decided to accompany him. This meant that I couldn't use my pa anymore after that, but I couldn't care less about it. While the kids were at school, Dan and I drove over to Violet's house. Violet has been living alone since her husband passed away a few years ago. Whenever I see her, she would always ask me to help with household chores during my visits for Thanksgiving and Christmas.
You've married into our family, so to follow the rules of this house.
The wife is the last one to eat her, while the husband is relaxing the work in the kitchen. Violet is always monitoring what I'm doing on Wii, and she points out every little detail to me.
Can't you be more efficient? This is why I hate mothers like you at a company. If you got married, then you should for your family. I pity my son and the kids.
Violet knows what's going on in our butt. She will never stop criticizing. When she came to visit me last month, she came unannounced to see if I was doing house chores properly and if I was looking after the kids. She stayed for about a week, and Eve went to work. She just only relaxed living room. I still remember that she never helped with any of the house chores and would just go home after relaxing and doing her own thing. And I will never forget what Violet me when my mother passed away.
Your mother will be relieved now. Parents are always in trouble when a child who is not good at anything.
I was angry with Violet for belittling the way she treated my mother's death. And so we arrived at Violet's house. Without a single apologetic look on Violet, quietly held out my credit.
It's not like you are using it. So fine.
That's not the point. The bill is coming to us.
Dan's voice rose at once after here. Violet had said, if someone spends a large amount of money on you, even if that person is your mother, you would tell them off. I was moved by Dan's honest attitude, but Violet doesn't budge at all. And this?
Because Helen's mother passed away. You'll receive her inheritance, right? So why don't you just use it to coy expenses? I'm sure you'll also get the life or money. So this amount is nothing compared to it.
Violet is trying to make us feel sorry for her, saying that she is living on peanuts. I revealed my frustration at Violet, again, took my mother's death light. Even though I was trembling with Aang, didn't care at all.
Oh, yes. This house has been badly damaged by recently. The building itself is so old that I am considering demolishing it. So I'm going to your place next month.
Huh?
Violet was not intimidated at all by Dan's low, angry reply. Rather, she became more arrogant than ever.
And we'll be living together. You have extra room anyway, don't you?
I was speechless at Violet's attitude, trying to force us to pay for the mooch she had used and even to live with her. Even Dan, who is usually so kind to her, is raising his voice at her outlandish comments and actions.
If you don't want me to live with you, give me the money to rebuild this house.
Dan sighed quietly at Violet, who remained defiant until the very end.
Helen, let's just go home now.
I followed Dan, who stood up without a word and left Violet's house immediately. At that moment, Violet yells out to this.
Well then, since I'm not going to demolish this place, so I'll even be moving in from next month. Take care of me well.
Violet's voice sounded so triumphant, it made me so angry. But Dan was even angrier than I was.
If talking with my mom is not going, I have no choice but to take action.
Witnessing Dan's anger, I realized, was the beginning of the end for Vic. During the next month before Violet moved in with us, Dan told me his plan. The company Dan works for offers comparable benefits, and if there is an issue, he plans on moving us temporarily.
No matter what we say, Mom will do to have it her way. So, if that's the case, then we are prepared too.
Fortunately, Dan's company provided housing near our kids' school, so we were able to bring along daily necessities and clothing for a while. I thought the kids would be confused or sudden move, but they surprisingly it and helped us prepare moving out.
I didn't know we had another house.
Maggie looked really excited,
I liked where we were living, but it was really nice too.
and Tim seemed to be enjoying himself. They used to sleep in their own room, but now they have to share a bedroom with other workers in the company house. I think the kids were very happy to sleep with us in the same bed, and the room was perfect because it had furniture and appliances. So we were to live in that company for a while. Then, on the day that Violet promised to move in, when Dan came home from work, he saw a big smile on his face. There, I found Violet's call history after another. I also showed him the call history that I had also ignored all of her. We both couldn't help but laugh. Just in time, Dan received an email from Violet.
Okay, well, it seems like it's time to pick up the call now.
Hearing the kids having fun, the husband put the phone on speaker so he could hear it. And as he answered the call, Violet's frantic voice spread through the room.
Where are you all right now?
Well, it's no doubt that we would tell him we are.
I already asked people to start demo the house, so I can't go back there. Please let me in your house now.
We can't, because we don't know yet.
What the hell do you mean?
She has no right to be like that. So Dan tried to tell Violet off on the phone. Violet then immediately started to.
Today's weather is heavy rain with warnings. Remember? Are you going to let me stay out in this weather like that?
You have pension, which you've been right. Why don't you just use it to stay
How could you say such a terrible thing? That's not something you should tell your own mother.
Well, you used Helen's credit card, her permission. No normal person would ask her to pay what you used with her credit card with her deceased mother's inheritance.
When my husband made a good argument, I couldn't help but choke up and argue back.
But that's not what this is about. Just let me in the house.
I told you I can't. If you go into our house without any permission, I'll call the police and accuse you of trespassing.
Now wait a minute. Don't you dare hang up on me.
Ignoring Violet screaming, Dan hung phone without any care. After that, there were tons of inquiries from Violet, but Dan consistently deflected them. Eventually, Violet left a message or answering machine apologizing for what she had done. Later on another day, Dan requested who was staying at a hotel to meet nearby restaurant. Violet apologized for everything, including using my credit card without my permission. Saying that my late mother's inheritance should pay for it. She apologized with her head down, thinking she might hit her head on the table, and for my part, I felt a little embarrassed. After Violet's apology in front of, she repaid me in cash. The 10,000 due had used this time, taken from her account. My husband and I were astounded by her remaining savings balance. Soon after Violet's husband passed, Violet told us that her pension was asked us to send money to support her. It was an hour's drive to Violet's. Our kids were still small, so we could visit her often. So Dan and I discussed it and agreed that at least we could support her by giving money. Since then, we have been sending a certain amount of money to Violet E. Even though Dan changed jobs and moved away, the amount of money we continued to send her remained the same.
I will not support you financially from now on.
Violet was astonished at her own From everything that had happened, Violet's selfishness in deciding to do so, even without her savings account, was strongly resented. But to this, Violet turned completely and desperately clung on to Dan.
That's not fair. I've been saving for a long time. I don't want to use it.
With that amount of money, you could afford to rent an apartment and even go into a nursing care facility. So I beg you, just stay out of our...
If we live together, this money is yours, right? I can't think of any reason why we shouldn't live together in the future.
That's enough. You say that, but have you ever spent a single penny on us so far? Maggie's textbooks, Tim's textbooks, were all bought by Helen's mother. You'd never even spend money on your grandchildren. When I was also worried about quitting my job, all you cared about was if I would send money to you.
Dan then brushed off Violet's stinginess and walked away. I heard Violet crying, but I didn't around. After that, as Dan had declared, we sent money to Violet. It's most likely that we won't prove financial support for Violet in the... So this means that we had cut off T. Violet. According to what we heard from Dan's acquaintance, Violet had rented an apartment and started living alone after that. It seemed that moving into a nursing facility wasn't an option for Viola, who was afraid that her neighbors would think she had been cut off from her community. The new place she moved into seems very old-fashioned apartment, and she is currently living there quietly. Violet didn't hesitate at all to use her credit card because she hadn't touched her own savings. The reason why Dan was so angry with Maggie was because he couldn't believe her attitude towards our kids and how she refused to support them. Dan said that he found it extremely that Violet was selfish enough to only for her so that she would have lifestyle for herself when she got. I feel like Violet will probably spend her savings. I'm actually nervous that with all her savings account, she might one day. Even if she does get scammed, we won't help her in any way. After ensuring that Violet had moved apartments, we would move out of the house and move back into our own home confidently.